The moment Caitlin Clark turned to Stephanie White on that sideline, something shifted. Not just in the game, not just in the building. In the entire conversation around the Indiana Fever, a conversation that has been building pressure underneath the surface for weeks and finally had nowhere left to go except straight up through the floor. And now everyone is standing in the wreckage trying to figure out what exactly just exploded. Here is what makes this situation different from every other early season drama in WNBA history. This is not a team struggling through a rough patch and searching for answers. This is the most watched franchise in women's basketball, carrying the most scrutinized player the sport has ever produced, publicly unraveling in real time while the whole world has its phone pointed directly at them. Every practice, every post-game, every sideline interaction, all of it captured, all of it dissected, all of it permanent. There is no quiet way out of what is happening inside that building right now. Think about the sequence of events and what they actually mean when you line them up honestly. Clark comes into 2026 healthy for the first time in 2 years. Full preparation, full off-season, everything pointing toward the redemption season her fanbase has been waiting for since she spent 2025 watching from the sideline in street clothes. The expectations were not manufactured. They were earned. This was supposed to be the year Indiana finally showed the basketball world what this roster could do when it was whole and healthy and locked in. Instead, viral confrontation with the head coach in Week 1. A 4-4 record that feels heavier than 4, and 4 has any right to feel. And now a credentialed journalist, Scott Agness, someone who has covered this franchise longer than most of the current roster has been alive, sitting at home because he tweeted 3 words about Clark's availability before a game. 3 words. The Fever called it inaccurate. They revoked his access via email. No sit down. No proper conversation. No acknowledgement that this was a person who had spent years building trust and access and a relationship with this organization. Just a decision made behind closed doors, communicated coldly, that told every reporter covering this team exactly how much transparency they should expect going forward. That decision matters more than people are giving it credit for, because franchises that are comfortable with the truth do not silence the people closest to it. Franchises that believe their own story do not need to control who gets to tell it. What the Fever did to Scott Agness was not just a media relations mistake. It was a signal, loud, unmistakable, impossible to walk back, that something inside that organization is being protected from outside eyes. And the thing being protected? Everyone already suspects what it is. The relationship between Caitlin Clark and Stephanie White has been the subtext of every Fever story since training camp. The sideline moment did not create that tension. It revealed it, gave it a face and a timestamp and a clip that will exist forever. And now every interaction between them, every substitution decision, every timeout conversation, every post-game press conference answer is going to be filtered through that moment. That is an almost impossible environment to win inside of. So here's the question that nobody covering the story is asking directly, but everybody is thinking. Can Caitlin Clark, the player who is supposed to finally have her moment this season, who came back healthier and hungrier than she has ever been, who carries the weight of an entire movement on her shoulders every single night, can she thrive inside a franchise that is clearly more focused on managing perception than building towards something real? That is what this video is about. Not the record, not the standings, not the noise. The truth about what is actually happening inside the Indiana Fever right now, and what it means for the one player whose future this entire organization was built around. We are getting into every detail, because this story is bigger than a bad start. And it is moving faster than anyone is ready for. And almost immediately something felt different. Not catastrophically different. Not the kind of different that generates immediate alarm. But different in the way that things feel when a room that looked perfectly arranged actually has one piece slightly off. And once you notice it, you cannot stop noticing it. The first signs were subtle. Substitution patterns that generated quiet conversation. Moments in games where the ball movement felt slightly disconnected from what Clark was trying to create. Small things. The kind of things that get dismissed as early season rust when a team is winning and get amplified into major storylines when a team is not. Indiana was not consistently winning. And then came the moment that made everything impossible to dismiss. The sideline confrontation between Clark and Stephanie White during the 100-84 loss against Portland did not come from nowhere. That is the part that the surface-level coverage keeps missing. That moment was not an isolated incident between two competitive people having a bad night. It was the visible expression of a tension that had been building inside that organization, quietly, carefully, away from cameras, for longer than anyone outside the building fully understood. The cameras caught it anyway. Within hours, the clip had been viewed millions of times. Analysts were dissecting body language. Former players were weighing in. Fans were divided in the way that only Fever-related content divides people, loudly, completely, with total conviction on both sides, and almost no middle ground anywhere. And sitting underneath all of that noise was a question that the viral moment had finally forced into the open. What is actually happening between Caitlin Clark and Stephanie White? Not what the post-game press conferences said. Not what the carefully worded organizational statements suggested. What is actually happening behind the closed doors, inside the practice facility, in the conversations that never make it to a microphone? That is what we are here to answer. And the answer is more layered than anything you have seen reported anywhere else. Here is what the people closest to this situation are willing to say, and what they are not. Start with the coaching dynamic, because that is where everything else originates. Stephanie White is not a bad coach. That needs to be said clearly and honestly before anything else, because the noise around this situation has pushed a lot of people toward a binary that does not reflect reality. She took a roster that lost its best player 13 games into the season and guided it to within one game of the WNBA Finals. That is not an accident. That is not luck. That is a coach who knows how to build a system, manage personalities, and make adjustments under pressure. But here is the thing about that 2025 run that nobody wants to say directly. It created a problem. When a team overachieves without its star player, when the system works, when the role players elevate, when the coach gets results that nobody predicted, it quietly shifts the internal power dynamic in ways that are almost invisible from the outside, but completely felt on the inside. The coach who guided the ship through the storm carries a different kind of authority into the following season. A validated authority. The kind that makes certain decisions feel more justified and certain pushback feel less tolerable. And Caitlin Clark is not a player who tolerates things she disagrees with quietly. That combination, a coach operating from a position of validated authority and a player operating from a position of championship-level expectation, was always going to create friction. The question was never whether the friction would exist. The question was whether the people involved had the relationship strong enough to work through it productively rather than let it surface publicly. The sideline confrontation answered that question in the worst possible way. But here is the detail that the viral clip does not show you. The detail that sources close to the situation keep coming back to when they describe what is actually happening inside that organization. The confrontation was not about that game. It was not about one substitution or one play call or one in-game decision that Clark disagreed with. It was the moment where weeks of accumulated tension, small disagreements, differing visions, the quiet friction of two strong personalities who have not yet found their shared language, broke through the surface in a way that neither of them could contain in that moment. Every coach and player relationship has a breaking point. Most of them happen in practice. Most of them happen behind closed doors. Most of them get resolved before anyone outside the building ever knows they happened. This one happened on national television. And that changes everything about how it has to be resolved, because now it is not just about fixing a relationship. It is about fixing a relationship while the entire basketball world is watching every subsequent interaction for signs of whether the fix is working. That is an almost impossible environment to repair something in. Now, add the Scott Agness situation on top of all of that, and the picture inside the Indiana Fever organization becomes significantly darker. Agness is not a gossip reporter. He is not someone who traffics in rumor or manufactures drama for clicks. He built Fieldhouse files over years of legitimate, sourced, credible reporting on this franchise. The Fever trusted him enough to give him access that most independent journalists never receive. That trust was real. That relationship was real. Then, he tweeted that Clark would not play against Portland on May 20th. Information he had from sources he trusted, published 100 minutes before tip-off. and the Fever called it inaccurate. Clark played. The Fever won. And 2 weeks later, Agnes received an email telling him his credentials had been revoked. No meeting, no conversation, no opportunity to respond or explain or defend his reporting. Just a decision delivered digitally, the organizational equivalent of changing the locks while someone is away. Think about what that decision communicates to every other journalist covering this team. Think about what it communicates to the players inside that building who watched it happen. Think about what it communicates about how the Indiana Fever view transparency, accountability, and the basic professional courtesy that organizations extend to the people who cover them. It communicates that the Fever are not interested in transparency right now. And organizations that are not interested in transparency are organizations that are protecting something. The question is what? Here is what the Indiana Fever are protecting. And it is not what most people think. The easy narrative, the one that generates the most clicks, the most rage, the most social media engagement, is that this organization is actively working against Caitlin Clark. That Stephanie White resents her. That the front office sees her as a threat to their authority. That the entire structure of the franchise is misaligned with the one player it was built around. That narrative is clean. It is emotionally satisfying. It fits the pattern that Clark's most devoted fans have been trained to recognize over 3 years of watching her navigate a league that has not always embraced her arrival. But it is not the full truth. The full truth is messier, more complicated, and in some ways more concerning than the simple version, because simple problems have simple solutions. What is actually happening inside the Indiana Fever right now does not have a simple solution. It has a structural one. And structural problems take time, require honesty, and demand a level of organizational self-awareness that franchises under public pressure almost never find access to. Here is what is actually at the center of all of this. 2 visions. 1 franchise. Stephanie White built something real in 2025. She built a system, a defensive identity, a way of playing that distributed responsibility across the roster and created genuine collective accountability. Players bought in. The culture was real. The results, a near-finals appearance without the best player on the team, validated everything she had constructed. Caitlin Clark wants to win a championship, not a near-finals appearance, not a culture that functions beautifully in her absence. A championship, the kind that requires the offense to flow through her hands, the game plan to maximize her specific gifts, and every decision made inside that building to be oriented around what makes her the most dangerous player on the floor. Those 2 things are not automatically compatible. That is the tension. Not personal animosity, not sabotage, not a coach who wants her star to fail. 2 genuinely held visions for what this team should be, colliding inside a pressure cooker that has the entire basketball world watching every single day. And here is why that tension has become so visible so quickly in 2026. Clark is healthy. For the first time since her rookie season, she is fully healthy, fully prepared, and fully expecting this offense to operate in a way that reflects her capabilities. In 2025, her injuries gave the system space to breathe without her. The team adapted. The system expanded to fill the void she left. And it worked well enough that certain habits, certain ways of running plays, distributing touches, making substitution decisions, became normalized inside that program. Now she is back, fully back. And some of those normalized habits do not align with how Clark needs this offense to function for Indiana to reach the level she is capable of taking them to. That friction is basketball friction. It is legitimate. It is the kind of thing that championship-caliber organizations work through behind closed doors over time. It is absolutely resolvable, but only if both sides are willing to have honest conversations that prioritize winning over being right. The sideline confrontation suggests those conversations have not been happening effectively enough. The Scott Agness situation suggests the organization is more focused on managing the outside perception of those conversations than actually resolving what is driving them. And the 4-4 record suggests that the cost of leaving this tension unresolved is already showing up in the results. Here is where it gets really important. The Commissioner's Cup game against Atlanta Dream is Thursday. Angel Reese on one side, Caitlin Clark on the other. The 2 most talked about players in women's basketball, meeting at a moment when Indiana desperately needs a performance that changes the narrative. Not just the scoreboard, the narrative, the feeling inside the building, the trust between a coach and a player that a viral moment publicly damaged and that no press conference answer has yet convincingly repaired. This game matters beyond the standings. It is the first real opportunity the Indiana Fever have had to show the basketball world that what happened, all of it, was a moment rather than a pattern. The difference between a moment and a pattern is what happens next. And what happens next is closer than anyone currently realizes. Here is the perfect 250-word CTA and outro. Before we let you go, if you watched this entire video, you already understand something about this Fever situation that the surface-level coverage is completely missing. This is not a story about a bad start. This is not a story about one viral clip. This is a story about whether the most watched franchise in women's basketball can resolve a structural tension between two genuine visions for what this team should be, before that tension becomes something permanent and irreversible. And it is happening right now, in real time, with the whole world watching. That is exactly why you need to be subscribed before you leave this page. Because the moment something breaks on the story, the moment Clark says something that cannot be walked back, the moment White makes a decision that shifts the entire dynamic, the moment this franchise reaches the point where silence is no longer an option, we are going to be the first place covering it with a context that actually makes it make sense.
Hit subscribe.
Turn notifications on, because this story does not wait for anyone. And while you are here, drop a comment right now. One question. Do you believe Stephanie White and Caitlin Clark can genuinely fix this relationship before it costs Indiana a season that was supposed to mean everything? The answer's in that comment